May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength, our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. You might remember the Dr. Seuss story of the Lorax, but even if you don't, I think you'll get the concept right away. There's a key moment in that fable where a character called the Onceler is confronted about his greedy behavior. And the Lorax tries to point out how much damage the Onceler is doing by being so selfish. But the Onceler refuses to listen to the Lorax. And rather than accept and learn from the critique and move on and do better, instead he makes a declaration that not only is he not going to stop being greedy, in fact, he's doubling down from now on. And he's finally going to start making a real effort. And he states this intention using a word that I don't think existed before Dr. Seuss. The Onceler says, "Then I got mad. I got terribly mad. And I yelled at the Lorax, 'Now listen here, Dad.'" What a perfect 60s sentiment. Listen here, Dad. "All you do is yap, yap, and say, 'Bad, bad, bad, bad.' Well, I have my rights, sir, and I'm telling you, I intend to go on doing just what I do. And for your information, you Lorax, I'm figuring on biggering and biggering and biggering and biggering." We want things bigger. We want to make things bigger. In a word, we just want more, even if it isn't always healthy. We might find ourselves wanting more security, more satisfaction, a greater sense of safety. For a time, we might believe that having more stuff is like having more security and safety. And in and of itself, that desire is understandable, except when we start to conflate it with other things, like what makes you happy in this life, or who are you? Time and experience can help us come to see that there are natural and respectable limits to biggering. Now, you wouldn't have known that traveling Interstate 40 as much as I did when I was a kid. Heading west every few miles, there were magnificent billboards advertising the Big Texan Steak Ranch in Amarillo. The Big Texan, home to the world-famous 72-ounce steak challenge. Shrimp cocktail, baked potato, salad, roll with butter, and of course the 72-ounce sirloin, cooked the way that you order it, about 4,500 calories on the plate. Eat up or tap out. No need for a reservation, just walk in anytime during business hours, finish it in under 60 minutes, and it's free. Meaning you pay for it when you come in, but if you finish it, they'll give you your money back. Meanwhile, no standing up, no leaving the table, and no one but you can touch your food. The odds are not in your favor. Only about 11% master the Big Texan 72-ounce steak challenge. The rest roll out the door, down the highway, lighter only around the wallet. You can watch them coming and going and trying and failing at the challenge table on a webcam, defeated by 4.5 pounds of meat. Enough steak to feed the family and then some. Well, Jesus tells us today about a man of means who has everything he needs and then some. No quibbles with the everything he needs part. It's the and then some that's going to get him into trouble. This man, in his time and place, in his context, he commits to a plan that is not acceptable. He has the perfect right to fill up his barns as they are, but he is obligated by a long-held custom. It would have been understood by the listeners of Jesus, a long-held custom to give the rest away to the people who need it after his barns have been filled. This was not negotiable. It was understood. Whatever wouldn't fit in the barns would go to the needy. So building bigger barns to hold the harvest, that's not supposed to happen. In his time and place, then, these are ridiculous and extreme actions, a finger in the eye of those living nearby this man. He leaves them high and dry. Who cares about my neighbors? He thinks to himself. I should eat and drink and be merry, he says to himself, remembering that bit from Isaiah, but forgetting the next line, for tomorrow we die. And so Jesus says that because of this man's insatiable behavior, the judgment of God will be upon him. I want to say that I don't think his wealth is his issue, for certainly many have done excellent things with wealth. His issue is his rapacious belief that he can never have enough. And so his big lie to himself is, just give me everything. Just give me everything, and then I'll be satisfied. For him, there is no limit. If you're out of space, you just build a bigger barn. Like the Onceler in the Lorax, he's convinced himself that greed is not problematic. In his mind, it's virtuous. Biggering our stakes, biggering our barns. I wondered what that said about human nature. I wondered what Jesus might be getting at. And I specifically wondered what beef producers would say about 72-ounce servings. So I asked, because hey, it's Kansas, and if you don't know a cattleman, you are not looking hard enough. May I introduce to you Jack and Linda Frick. Could you just raise a hand real fast? Thank you, you all. They are relatively new members to Grace Cathedral, and I have really enjoyed getting to know them. And one of the things that I learned about Jack and Linda is that they spent decades farming and ranching in western Kansas, putting meat on America's tables. And I understand even in retirement, you can never really get away from it entirely, can you? So on every level, personally and professionally, Jack and Linda know their cows, and they encouraged me to encourage you to think about the difference between what we need and what we want. To really think about and locate that difference and really interrogate it and ask ourselves, what is it that we think we hope to gain by going so far beyond what's reasonable? And they also help me to remember that just as with the crop that was brought into the barns and the man in the parable, every last ounce of beef is the sum of many invisible sacrifices that went into forming it. I was told, and I tell you, to be mindful of this very intense field of labor most of us take for granted. It starts well before sunrise and it extends to well after dark in all times and seasons. So to gorge on 72 ounces in 1 hour when 8 ounces has all the protein you need for one day is at the very least excessive. And it begs one simple theological question for our lives that neither the man in the parable nor the onceler thought to ask themselves. And it should be blinking like a neon sign right now for you. And that question is, how much is enough? How much is enough? For Christians, for followers of Jesus, it's an uncomfortable question. We need to keep checking in with ourselves about it. And there is a subtle answer that we have to keep exploring. How much is enough? Well, however much is sufficient for our need, that's how much is enough. And it may be less, and in some cases, far less than we think. The rest, according to Jesus' parable, apparently belongs to the world. And the whole thing, every bit, everything we have, from beginning to end, belongs to God. God gives it freely in the first place. So why the closed fist? That means maybe holding on to the metaphorical barn for now and not tearing it down and building something bigger in its place. That means cutting up the steak and sharing it. It means having enough to get by on and being satisfied with that. And thanking God for what we do have, which by almost any standard, for many of us, quite often is already more than enough. Sufficiency.